Good evening. This is the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Newcastle. This is the January 31st, 2018 meeting. Mr. Chairman.
First case is the Campfire Club.
Good evening, guys. Good evening. I'm Jerry Barrett, landscape architect and site planner for the project. I'm here with Ward French from the Campfire Club of America, as well as Hugh Wiley. So this project has been before this board before. They are here for an amendment to their special permit to allow the reconstruction of their council hall and to continue to operate their special permit. This project is on Campfire Road. It's a 234-acre site on Campfire Road. The subject area is right in here. This is the existing council hall, which is right in this area here. The parking lot is here. This is the parking lot you're seeing here, and Campfire Road would be out here. So the idea with this project, Ward, do you want to move on to the next one?
I'm sorry, could I just interrupt? So this evening, are you recapping what
Just going to
what
quickly
you
give you
already?
an
We're going to do whatever you want us to do.
Well, I just want to.
I was gonna-
Or do you,
I just-
or, well, I just want, no, I don't think that's necessary, but I wanted to hear from you as to what your intention was and what, so that we recognize whether or not there was new material that you're presenting or if you are summarizing what you have previously presented.
It's only a summary. The plans are pretty much, they are what you saw before. We added one note to the plan about the membership not changing. There's no change in use, there's no change in membership. It's only the existing council hall, about 3,600 square feet, is going to be demolished. A new one, about 7,200 square feet on 2 levels, so it's about the same. Footprint is going in, rotated slightly, and associated site work, stormwater, that type of thing.
Okay, okay.
So why don't we just go, Ward, to sheet 3, and I think I could just do the summary from sheet 3. Okay, so what we have here is the council hall. We'll just go back down a little bit. I just want to show something here. This is the existing council hall that's right here now. And what this is going to be the new council hall. So the new council hall it's right on top of where the existing council hall is. It's just going to go to 2 levels. There is a connection to the main cabin. All we did was we rotated the building so everything is in the same orientation to create more of a campus effect, some visual order, some physical order. We have a new loop road coming in to get to the main cabin. Also to get to the new council hall, you can enter onto the 2nd floor or you can enter into the front of the building. What you're seeing here is we're necessarily going to have to repave this part of the parking lot. There's an entire stormwater management plan that has been developed to the satisfaction of the town engineer to capture the runoff from this existing driveway as well as the new building, and all that will be handled up into this area. There's been an extensive ERB and planning board review, and we've agreed on a planting mitigation plan. The entire site, whatever's disturbed, is going to be revegetated. We're going to cut islands into the existing parking lot. There's going to be new shade trees planted. And I think the only significant thing that was left was the sighting distance. And maybe, Ward, do you want to flip to, I think it's sheet, maybe about sheet, it'll say vehicular sighting. Go to the vehicular turning movement, that one right there. And there was discussion with the planning board about the sighting and concern for safety entering and exiting the club. There's 2 entrances. There's one entrance that is down further west, which is this one down by the Taconic. The Taconic is essentially running right over here. As this is the service entrance. Very good sighting distance looking to the west, looking to the east. As long as we clear the vegetation on a regular basis, which is going to be done, there's an easement being drawn up now. That's going to work nicely. This is the main entrance here, looking to the east. There's adequate sighting distance as long as we do a little bit of clearing here, and there's being a site easement, maintenance easement being put together there, so that will be maintained in perpetuity to make sure that that sighting distance is always available. What had to happen here is this is a rock knob. You can see the landform, and you just could not see through it. So what had to happen is we have to basically excavate about 6 feet of rock out of here, and that will allow a driver to see over the rock into an oncoming car. With that done, we have adequate sighting distances at both entrances. That was the last piece of the puzzle with the planning board they were concerned with, and that's been satisfied.
And it's probably worth noting, I guess, that during the construction phase of the project, that the service entrance will be used, correct?
That was noted in there.
Right,
Correct.
right.
And it was also noted at their large events, they will be using primarily the service entrance because of the sighting lines are
Go back there.
No.
That's not a condition.
The reason you were
Well, no,
making this,
Any case, we're going as per the conditions.
Right.
I read that.
Mhm. Rich, was there anything you wanted to say?
no, it's
Oh,
just
okay,
same thing.
Okay. Eric, you?
No, I think
No.
we're ready to proceed. The hearing was closed, the public hearing was closed at the last meeting, so no further public comment is
Sabrina,
permitted at
did
this
you
time.
want to say anything, or?
I can move you forward. I have
Sure.
no comments on what they
Yes.
presented. We had submitted to you yesterday the full environmental assessment form, the parts 1, 2, and 3. Part 3 will be based off of your determination tonight. I have also enclosed for you 2 draft resolutions. One is a State Environmental Quality Review Act negative declaration, as you had indicated at your last meeting. For your review, it is in draft form, and we can take comments on that if you have any changes. And then, once you make the environmental determination, you can move on to considering the special permit. And you also have a draft resolution for your comment of that document tonight as well.
Does anyone on the board have any comments on any of the elements that Sabrina just mentioned?
Are we going to do the secret one first, or both together, or?
No, well, look, go ahead. Dee.
No, I don't have
We
any
should do the
comments on the
secret
secret
first.
resolution, but I do
Okay.
have one minor comment on the special use permit.
Okay, let's go.
If you want to do that
Yes, let's
together,
do
is
that. Yeah, sure.
Is that the way
However you
you
want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just refer to the page number and the line number.
Yep. I gotta find it again. Page 10 of 13, line number 18, and it says item number 9, paragraph 9. You see that?
Yes.
Normally, when we do this big of a project, I usually add in the use of an engine brake by the big construction equipment that comes in and out, and I
Okay.
don't see it in this one unless I missed it somewhere.
It's not in here.
If it's not in there, what I'd like to do is restrict engine brake use, AKA Jake brakes, within
Yep.
500 feet of the entrance. Other than that, I have no other comment.
Okay. What we will do is we will add that as a new number 10 and bump the conditions down in the final.
However you do it.
Okay.
Anyone else with any other comments on either the special use permit resolution or the seeker resolution?
No, I've read them both, and they both look good. I made one comment earlier to council about the short time limit, but the applicant is, I think, already aware that you have to come back 60 days before to make an application for an extension, which is going to be very likely.
We were hopeful that we could have a more realistic time period, but it was indicated that.
We'll take a look at it. It's not going to be a problem, but, yeah,
As long as we're making progress.
just put it on your
Correct.
calendar.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not something that we can amend, but
That's fine, we can work with that.
So Eric, tonight then, if there's no other comment by the board,
The board, if the board has any further questions regarding either of the resolutions or the Part 2 or Part 3 of the EAF, if you're satisfied with that document, you can adopt the secret resolution and the negative declaration first. I would vote on that resolution and the adoption of the negative declaration first, and then depending on whether you approve that resolution, you would proceed to the special use permit resolution.
So the neg deck first.
So yes, so you would vote to adopt the resolution, the secret resolution and negative declaration. That would be the first motion if the board is inclined to make that motion.
I make a motion that the board adopt the negative declaration in accordance with seeker and
Pursuant to the secret resolution that's
to the-
before you.
seeker
I'll
resolution.
second that.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
And then the board would proceed to move to adopt the special use permit resolution.
As amended.
I move that the board adopt the special use permit
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That's it?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Next case is Chang. Is Chang here?
Mr. Chang? Hi.
So I guess you probably got the updated material I submitted last night. It's basically incorporated the recommendation from Ms. Coleman, and in the proposal, basically, I proposed to plant 5 evergreen trees, 8 to 10 feet tall. That's basically what Mr. Coleman recommended in the buffer area between the shed and the neighboring property, and change the setback to 15 feet, just so that, because there is not a little, it's actually like a 3 feet drop in that at around like 25 feet to the border. And by moving 5 feet, that will allow the shed and the tree plant on the same grade. And so 8 to 10 feet will be enough to hide the shed.
So, I think we've heard from Mr. Coleman, right, today or yesterday?
Well, yeah, you received a memorandum from Mr. Coleman on January 23rd. There were some additional communications I had with Mr. Coleman with respect to this matter. I think it would be appropriate if there are any members of the public here, the public hearing's still open, that the board here, if there are any other members of the public who want to speak, and then we can discuss the issues that Mr. Coleman had raised.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the Chang application? Please come forward. Mr. Chang, if you could just have a seat for a moment while we hear from this individual.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Peter Hauk. I'm the homeowner at 12 Whitlow.
Which, if you could just help us, where is that in relation to?
Let's see, I would be east. I'm on the east side, I believe.
Okay.
Basically, I'm the one neighbor who's impacted by this, essentially. I mean, I do have Mr. Coleman's letter here, his latest memorandum. He does mention that, let's see, the location of the proposed shed will create visual impacts to both the adjacent neighbor to the east, that's me, and also the neighbor to the north and northeastern corner of the property, which would be the Smiths and the people who live next door on the Random Farm. The issue that I have, and I think I mentioned it last time you were here, I don't know if you recall, Mr. Chang had removed trees, cut down about 50 trees. Without a permit. The permit was issued after the fact. He has created a wall of logs about 35, 40 yards long and about this high. Along with it, he did the excavation, which I believe he had no permit for as well. He also removed boulders, and there are boulders piled there now as well. It's created a visual blight. I've lived in Chappaqua most of my life. I grew up here. I don't know of another piece of property that has a similar issue. I mean, you probably have heard many, but I had not seen any. He has put in, I suppose, some plantings, but those plantings are in the front of his property. He has not put a single planting on my side, which would block.
Screen the shed
Screen,
from
exactly.
your
And not
property.
just the shed,
Right.
but also this wall of logs and boulders and whatnot.
Okay.
He has put things on his side, and I don't blame him. He doesn't want to look at it either. My issue is in 4 or 5 years' time, my children will have graduated from Greeley. I'm going to want to sell my property. People are going to come see this wall of dead trees and boulders and a shed down in the corner of the property. And I'm going to have an issue selling my home. And I may not get the value for the house that I should get simply because there's a situation in the adjacent property. Mr. Chang has never come and spoken to me about any of this prior. He never came to me and said, I'm going to cut down trees or I'm going to do this. He just sort of goes ahead with these things, and then after the fact, it seems, he comes and tries to present his case. He speaks very well. His letter is well written. I've read it. It's unusual, though, if you read, he does say that he's going to plant these Leyland cypress trees, which he said are somewhat deer resistant. My experience is that deer will eat absolutely anything. If it's green and it's not moving, they'll eat it. But he also talks about how they have eaten the Leyland cypress that he has planted. They were also, as Mr. Coleman stated, that the trees were not sufficient. They're not sufficient height. They're not sufficiently spaced to adequately screen. Had he come to me, had everything else been okay prior, I don't want trouble with my neighbors. I have a good relationship with all my neighbors. I would have said fine. But my issue is I don't feel confident that he is going to act in good faith as a neighbor and do what's right. I think that he seems to put Band-Aids on things. He buys plants that are smaller, they're inadequate in size, as Mr. Coleman noted, again, in his memorandum. Are inadequate size and spacing, do not currently provide any screening potential for the shed. And again, I am the one person who unfortunately seems to be having to deal with this issue because my neighbors, he's put it at the initial grade, but he did push a great deal of his front yard to the backyard, so he'll see essentially the top of the shed, as will the neighbors on Random Farm, but for me, I will see the front of the shed. There's also stuff that I suppose he wants to put in his shed now, which is just sort of sitting in his backyard. It looks unkempt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just have a seat here for a moment? Could we go over what
Right.
Mr. Coleman had?
So Mr. Coleman did do an inspection of the property. He did do an analysis with respect to the prior issue relating to the removal of the trees. However, that's really not an issue this board can address. That's a separate issue the environmental coordinator is going to have to address with the property owner as far as whether he has satisfied the tree replacement plan. We understand, I understand the neighbor is concerned about that, and that's something you should certainly, or he should address with the environmental coordinator if there are concerns. This board needs to focus on the issue of what this board thinks is appropriate in balancing the 5 factors and where the placement of the shed is, and if screening is enough to ameliorate the environmental issues or negative impacts on the neighbors that you see from having the shed in that area. That's what this board has to analyze.
The logs and the boulders.
That's really, no, that's unrelated to the shed. That was all there. That's the prior plan. And again, the neighbor should speak to the environmental coordinator as far as removing that material or whether that material needs to be removed as part of that prior remediation to that issue.
We can't take into consideration good faith or bad faith in the past.
You can certainly consider whatever you think is appropriate. As far as issuing a condition with respect to if the board believes that, or if the board determines that a variance should be issued, but that screening must be put in place, there are measures that you could impose on the applicant to require that screening go in before the shed, or that there be a set site plan, not just, at this point, there's no plan that really indicates the location, size, and type of the trees that are going to actually be planted. And in my communications with the environmental coordinator, his recommendation was that the applicant obtain a professional who would prepare a plan containing all that information pursuant to his instructions in the January 23rd memo that he issued. So that was the environmental coordinator's recommendation.
Was he, Steve, that is aware of the new location that that Mr. Chang is talking about now for changing he's changing the location of the shed?
I wasn't sure, I'm not sure if the environmental coordinator is aware of a new location for the shed.
Mr. Cheng, could you
That's
come
that I
back
don't
to the
know.
microphone, please? So,
Ye-
one of the issues that the board's having is there's obviously a lot going on at this location, some of which we should not be involved with. As it
Yes.
relates to the shed and the screening as it relates to your neighbor, do you have a plan that includes a legend that shows where you want to place the shed and what you're going to plant in terms of screening that will buffer the visual impacts to your neighbor?
Yes.
Is there such a plan?
Yes, basically the second.
I'm sorry. If you have the plan, we'd like to see it.
It's first off, in this revision, I marked it revision number 4. I described that it's basically the same as the plan we submitted last time, except that in last time I marked the tree. I didn't specify the size, but this time in this revision, I specified I will follow Mr. Coleman's recommendation, put in the 5, 8 to 10 feet tall evergreen trees, and the species will be Leland cypress or Norway spruce. The similar type, Mr. Coleman listed a couple of varieties. And at least from my experience, I tried all of them. If you see my letter to Mr. Coleman, responding to the background information, among the 178 trees, I tried all those species. I think Norway spruce probably works better than Leland cypress. So I probably would choose that eventually. But the location and the size of the trees are marked on the last submission. Except that in last submission, I proposed a 5-feet tree, and this time I changed it to.
talking about?
Oh no, that's background information for the front yard. There is a survey I submitted last time. I used a green dot marked the 5 trees. Yes. And on that, 3 of the green dot were the existing ones. It's just this time I will replace it with the 8 to 10 feet bigger trees. And because that area basically is 15 to 20 feet long and 15 feet wide, a square foot is roughly about the size of half of this room, pretty much. And we put in 5 large trees. There isn't much of a change I can make there. Pretty much all the trees in, it's already filled up the whole space, pretty much.
So what
Yeah.
you just said was you have some trees and you will probably choose one or the other, which I don't think we can use as a guide for ourselves. What we need is a definitive plan showing exactly what you're going to put in, exactly.
I can
where they're
decide
going.
right now. I can choose the Norway spruce.
No,
and
we need,
I
but
would
we
like
need
to
to.
see a plan, preferably prepared by an expert, with the proper dimensions noted on it, for all the plants, as to where they're going to be located, as to where the shed is going to be located, the dimensions being vis-à-vis the border and the relationship to all the other improvements and your neighbors' properties.
That's already in this draft.
Okay, what you prepared so far is not adequate, so we would like to see something more detailed.
In terms of what detail you want?
Type of trees that you'll be planting,
Uh-huh.
the heights.
The height is in there, and the tree
If I
is a
could-
Norway spruce.
If I could try this.
Uh-huh.
For the board to adequately consider your application,
Uh-huh.
we would like you to come in, make an appointment, see Mr. Coleman, review the plan that in some cases may be lacking some detail this evening. Excuse me.
Okay.
Take that plan, meet with Mr. Coleman, allow him to comment on it to you, and if it's satisfactory, we would like you to come back next month with it.
But right now, the plan I proposed is the exact word I copy and paste from Ms. Coleman's recommendations.
As far as,
When you
I don't
submit-
know.
When you submit the next plan, the revised plan that we've just requested you to submit, please submit it more than a week in advance, so we have an opportunity to review it and also consult with Mr. Coleman in advance.
Also, I think
Mr. Coleman just sent me the letter last Thursday.
we understand, and with respect to Mr. Coleman, I don't know if the location of the shed has changed since Mr. Coleman issued his memo. That's one thing I think needs to be clarified. I think that it needs to be a plan, not a written narrative of what's going to be planted. It needs to be an actual plan showing locations, heights, and types of trees that, a professional would know exactly what type of plant. Because what happens is, in order to approve the plantings, the environmental coordinator needs to see exactly where the items are supposed to be and whether they match what's on the exact plan. And a narrative doesn't give enough information for the environmental coordinator to make that determination. So I think his recommendation to the board is that there be an actual site plan, not a
we're-
written narrative.
it's not our intention to have you keep coming back before this board.
No, I understand. The thing is that I don't plan to hire some professional to measure and make a drawing of this just to put the 5, because as I said, I basically intend to follow what Mr. Coleman recommended.
Okay.
I mean, word to word, and I certainly can talk to Mr. Coleman, but
I would tell you
but
that
he
it-
already tell everything basically in
Tell
text.
you as,
Yeah.
again, we don't want you to keep coming back. That's not our intention. But Mr. Coleman, as recently as today, said that he does not believe that the plan that he has seen is adequate for our purposes. So,
Which plan? The one?
well, that's a good question. But the real point is that there isn't an adequate plan that he believes that the board can evaluate in terms of your application. So the way we're going to end this evening is to say, please speak to Mr. Coleman, go back to see him with a plan. If he wants you to amend it, if he wants you to adjust it, if he wants you to redo it, I would ask that you do that with him, and then come see us next month. I know you're confused by the process. I can see it
Very
in your face.
much.
Okay.
Yeah, because as I said, I'm copy pasting his words into this plan.
Well,
And,
copying words isn't what this board needs in terms of making this evaluation. What they need is an adequate site plan that shows distances, that shows sizes of trees and other vegetation, so that we can make an evaluation. That's about as much time as we have on this evening, so I'd encourage you to go see Mr. Coleman, okay?
Okay.
Thank
all
you
right
very
then.
much.
Thank
I
you.
don't know if the neighboring property owners still had any further comment, but that's up to you.
I'm sorry, is there anything else you wanted to say? If,
Only that, I brought up the trees, not because I expect anything to be done here, and I understand we went over this before, this is not the purpose of the board. I just wanted to show prior intent and history. My concern again is that if it can be done adequately, then I'm fine with it, and I'll deal, with the logs or whatever, with the environmental engineer and
Right.
have that, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I'll
Okay.
be back.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Wait, Can I just?
Yeah,
maybe-
no, sure.
Maybe just to clarify to Mr. Chang, one thing. The reason we need the plan, a drawn plan by a professional or somebody that's capable of drawing these plans, because without that plan in our record, there's no way for the future members of this board or whoever that wants to check on it to know exactly what we tentatively, whether we approve it or disapprove it, we don't know yet. But if we should approve it, we need an exact plan to show what we approved so that in the future there is no confusion. We're not trying to pick on you or anything, but our records need to be complete. And the verbal narrative will not complete the record. It's the plan that we need. So, yeah, sure.
So I don't have a problem with drawing a more detailed plan and mark exactly the trees relevant to location, to the shed and to the border and everything. But I just want to make sure that you guys understand what I'm proposing, and if you have any issue with that, because I don't want that. Even if I hire somebody or drawing a very detailed plan, spending $1,000 doing that, and then you come back and say, no, this is not good, we're going to change this, and then we do it all over again.
In a
I want to
ver-
make sure
in
you
a ver-
understand what I'm proposing,
in a
if
very
that's
elementary,
okay.
in
And
a
then
very
we
elementary
can-
way, without the details that we require, we can see that you intend to plant many trees that would seem to address the issue of the screening. So if you're looking for some general statement about what you have submitted so far, generally speaking, it looks like directionally, it's headed correctly.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
And Mr. Chair, I think if the environmental coordinator does sign off on the plan and says it's acceptable, that would go a long way to
Yes.
this board being satisfied as
You
well.
would then,
so.
you would then know, after you've spoken to Mr. Coleman, and he's satisfied, that this board will look favorably upon your application.
Okay.
Okay.
And last quick question, because right now I propose that variations on both on the rear side and the side to the east, which is the border with 12 Whitlaw, and on the east side I propose the 15 feet right now and 28 in the back. The required setback is 35 on the side, and if I'm willing to move this to the west, like 15 feet or 20 feet or so, to meet that 35 feet of setback, will that free me of the obligation to planting trees because there is no variation on the east anymore?
Okay. we're not in a position to address the environmental
That's
issues.
what Mr. Dobbs proposed in the first meeting, so.
Putting aside what what Mr. Coleman has to evaluate as it relates to these other issues on the site, if you can move the shed location within the setback so that it does not require a variance, then you've eliminated that issue as it relates to your application.
And we wouldn't have jurisdiction over this. If you
Okay,
moved it in
okay.
within the setbacks.
You wouldn't be here.
Okay, yeah. To be honest, if I move this 20 feet this way, I'm free of the obligation to spending money because basically planting the trees, it's several times more expensive than the shed itself. And I want to do this. I spend the money, want to do this, including the permit fee and everything, solely in the best interest of the neighbor, because that way it's good for everybody. Nobody can see that. It's tucked in the trees. But if I move it to the west this way, the neighbor would look at it directly without any difference, except there is no trees between that. And I wouldn't intend to spend any money to plant trees in that case anymore. I just want to say,
Wouldn't have to.
yes, exactly. I mean, I'm spending the money try to make it better for everybody. And it seems like I'm not appreciated on that. I'm a little bit upset on that, but not on the board.
Don't draw that
But
conclusion.
I would just want to say it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing was that about the background information. I read up the letter, you probably see that. And one point I want to point out was that the trees I removed, mostly were dead trees and diseased trees. And these were verified by Mr. Coleman after they were cut. He verified the trunk. And even now, a lot of the logs are piled there. There are a lot of American elms trees there. And they were infested by the Japanese beetle or something. I consulted bartley tree experts, and they verified that even after I cut those diseased trees, there was one more tree got dead within a couple of months after I removed those diseased trees. And right now, that tree is standing there. And I welcome my neighbor to inspect that. And this spring, he's not going to see the leaves on that dead tree. This just happened last year, after I removed the diseased trees. So they were not good trees, and most of them were the diseased trees. And these were verified, and can still be verified as of today by the log. All the lava channels are still there on the logs. That can be really inspected. And also, most of the trees I removed are along the south side of the property, close to my house.
I have to cut you off, Mr. Chen. You know what? This is not the jurisdiction of this board.
I know. It's just because the letter, Mr. Coleman's letter mentioned it as a background, I feel like I don't want to mention this either. In the first meeting, I refrained from
Don't
speak
want
about
to.
it.
If you don't want to,
But
please
since
don't.
it's involved, I feel like I'm obligated to explain that, so that I hope that we can leave this thing out of the picture
We are not-
altogether and not to mention it again, because it's totally irrelevant.
We understand. Thank you for coming in.
Okay,
We'll see
thank
you
you.
next month. Thank you.
Okay, Sunshine Children's Home.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. We're going to start.
Yeah, let me-
Our council is
We're just going to,
something to say first.
as far as with respect to the meeting tonight, we're here for Sunshine Children's Home application for an amendment to the site development plan associated with the approved special use permit. Tonight, the only issue the board is considering, as stated in the agenda, is the proposed notice of intent to declare lead agency status under SECRA as it relates to the current application. As the board may recall, on September, I believe, 28th, 2016, a SECRA resolution was finding a negative declaration with respect to the approved, or the amendment to the special use permit that was proposed by Sunshine Children's Home. So that negative declaration was in effect. Once the special use permit then was approved, after that negative declaration was adopted, secret case law does not permit an amendment or rescission of that negative declaration. Because the board has already, again, made a final decision on the underlying action, the negative declaration cannot be amended or rescinded. We have investigated with respect to the SECRA requirements for the current application, and under the current application would be considered a new action under SECRA. It was also determined that this action is considered a type 1 action, which is consistent with the prior determination, and a full environmental assessment form has been submitted by the applicant. Now, the first step in the SECRA process, once that full EAF is submitted, is for this board, which is the permitting agency for the special use permit, to distribute a notice of intent to be lead agency, assuming this board is going to take on the lead agency status. That is the matter that is under consideration tonight. So there's really nothing else this board needs to do tonight other than that issue, and that's the only issue that really needs to be addressed. Now, just as far as the SECRA process going forward, assuming the board does issue the notice of intent to the involved agencies, who are the other permitting agencies involved in this application, once those agencies respond or 30 days have passed and the board is able to assume its lead agency status, it can proceed with the SECRA review at that time and the merits of or the underlying issues relating to that SECRA review. With respect to that issue, the current application would not reopen for renewal or reconsideration all the aspects of the prior action that this board considered and issued a detailed environmental finding statement on, or a detailed negative declaration on. Therefore, the scope of the board's environmental review concerns the facts and circumstances presented by this current modification. So I just wanted the board to know, as far as going forward with SECRA, you would measure it basically against the approved special use permit you issued, and you would look at the modifications to that approved special use permit. With respect to some of the remaining issues, since this board was last here, I believe in November, there was a referral to the Architectural Review Board and Planning Board, and they've both given favorable recommendations. You have the ARB's memo, which was just issued today, which states that the ARB finds the new design to be very well conceived. At the November meeting as well, the board heard statements regarding some work that was ongoing on the property. There was the town building department and the town consultants and the planning department all reviewed that work, did a detailed investigation of that work, and a memorandum was issued by the building department on January 16th, 2018, addressing that issue. And I would refer the board and the public to that issue for the resolution with respect to that site work. So I just wanted the board to know, with an update with respect to what's happened since the November meeting.
Do we want to have Rich describe the content of his memo this evening? Or?
I think at this point we can, I think you have the memo. I think the memo speaks for itself, and the public has had access to it. If you have any questions regarding any of the matters raised in that memo, I think it would certainly be appropriate to ask the building inspector.
Okay. So. Any questions of the building inspector? No? Okay, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mark Weingarten. I'm a partner in the law firm of Del Bello, Donnell, and Weingarten, Wise, and Wiedeker, and it's my pleasure to be here this evening representing the Sunshine Children's Home and Rehab Center in connection with its request for an amendment to the site development plan associated with the previously approved special exception use permit, which permits the expansion of the Sunshine Children's Home here in Newcastle, New York. Before I start, I want to understand a little bit of what was just stated. I understand that the lead agency issue and intention needs to be done today, and that's fine, and we look forward to that process. And I would agree, and I hope that we're on next month. While it is not 30 days, we will endeavor to get a response from the involved agencies before that, so that if that does occur, then you can proceed in February. We would ask that courtesy. If not, we would have to be put over to March, and we understand that's how the law works, so we will do that. The question I have is that I'm not sure is there a public hearing tonight on the substance, or are you only,
No,
you just want
there is
to,
not.
so you just want to present, and so now I'll ask, do you want a presentation from us about the substance this evening, which sometimes happens when you open up a matter, but since you've seen it before, are you simply putting this over to next month, and we'd be satisfied with that as well? I leave that to that's up to you, the board.
With respect, the only issue that's open for public discussion tonight is the notice of intent to be lead agency. The public is here. If they want to speak to that individual issue, I think that would be that's appropriate for the board to hear. But any other substantive issues really are not appropriate for the board to hear tonight, so.
And so there really is no reason for the applicant to...
Unless he has some additional information with regard to anything that's gone on to date, it's not necessary to address the
We would
substance
only
of
ask
the
as a
application.
matter of law that since there was a public hearing that was stated for this evening, since it is being put over until the lead agency process is continued, that it be continued to the next meeting, so that that remains open and that notice remains in effect. And if that's your pleasure, and we also, obviously, we have our professionals here, et cetera. If you had questions, anything to do with why we were off the agenda, we're here for that. But if you're not interested at this point, we'll come back in
Not
February.
interested is the right description.
Well,
but,
don't have any questions at this time.
Right.
We will come back in February for that conversation.
So can we proceed with...
I think if any members of the public have any issue with respect to the notice of intent, this board's notice of intent to be lead agency, it would be appropriate for the board to hear on that specific issue.
Just a notice, nothing else.
Right, just the
So
notice.
I
of
would only
intent.
mention on that
Yes.
particular issue, from our client standpoint, you were lead agency on the earlier application because you are the threshold agency, the special permit being the most important part of this process, which is really who is the lead agency. In this matter, there are only the other involved agencies here, the Westchester County Department of Health, because they have certain permitting issues, and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. You are clearly the threshold agency, and we think it's appropriate that you would declare your intent. We don't believe those other agencies will interfere with that, and we think, just as the last time, that it would go forward on that basis.
And just so the public is clear, the meeting, the public hearing is being held open. There will be an opportunity to comment at a later hearing with respect to the substance of the secret issues and the special permit issues. So that, just so the public is clear on that.
Right. So are we going to make a motion to...
I would hear, if
Nominate.
any members of the public have an issue, you could hear from them, and then the board can make a motion to distribute the intent to be lead agency to involved agencies, correct?
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the sole issue this evening of the nomination of the zoning board as lead agency?
I would.
Okay. I want you to know that if you veer off of that subject, we're going to ask you to stop.
Okay.
Okay?
Adam Stellaro, Cy Pageant Roselle, for Cynthia and Jeffrey Manicherian. So with respect to the secret notice, I respectfully disagree with your council's analysis on having to do this as a separate project under SECRA. You have our submissions on that. We believe that to treat this as a separate project would be segmentation. But we've already submitted written comments on that. I just want to object for the record that this is being narrowed to this issue. You have a room full of people who have come out tonight with issues because they were told there would be a public hearing on the zoning application that's before the zoning board. So I'm simply stating an objection on behalf of myself and my clients and everyone here who came out tonight for a public hearing, because it's not just about SECRA, there's a zoning issue as well. So I just want to be sure that if this gets put over and we have to get everybody back here again, that there will be an opportunity not just to hear SECRA issues, but all of the things that you have to consider as a matter of zoning to approve the revised site plan and the amended special permit will get heard at some point. I would like them to be heard tonight because we have all the people here.
That's not our intention. Are you finished?
Sorry, what's not the intention?
What you just said.
The intention is not to let the public speak.
Not on.
We're not proceeding
Only on the issue
with
before
the
us.
application at this
The
time.
agenda states continued public hearing with respect to notice of intent to clear lead agency status. That's the first, that's the what's on the agenda
Right.
tonight.
It's a
sorry, have
continued
you-
public hearing that was open last time and people were able to speak last time. And we were asked to come back this time to talk about the building inspector issues, and now we're being told yet again next time.
I don't know that that's the case, but okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Hi.
Sharon Green, Trip Street. It's been a long time since I've been before this board, and I recognize a few faces, but I've been involved with the, over the course of the years with the ZBA, strictly with respect to the property that was on, that used to be the Legionaries of Christ. I I'm just, for my own reasons, just getting up to speed on what this is involving, and I'm just questioning, because I find it mind-boggling that a negative declaration was done on this based on everything that we've gone through in the past with other properties that have very similar issues. So given that I just heard that you cannot change a negative declaration to a positive declaration, I have two comments. One is that there is precedent, case law, I believe, that allows permits to be denied even when, based on environmental factors, even when there has been a negative declaration. And I think given all that's been shown in the past year and issues relating to water and whatever else has come up, and the fact that the expansion is so great, there are going to be obvious environmental issues. And given that you've chosen to make a negative declaration, I think it should be considered that there still should be issues relating to environmental aspects that should enable a denial of these permits. Given your point of view, based on my understanding that you chose to do a negative declaration, given that the planning board has the experience and the expertise with all of these environmental issues that are in question, I would question why you're proceeding to declare yourselves lead agency instead of the planning board.
The planning board does not have an approval authority with respect to this application. And just so the public knows, there is litigation challenging this board's negative declaration and all the issues that have been raised with respect to that matter. So this is a modification with respect to the previously approved amended special use permit. So
But
all those issues were addressed before the court, are being addressed before the court, and we're awaiting a decision before the court with respect to those prior issues that were the subject of the secret resolution and the negative declaration. This application, the board considers any changes that were made and whether those changes create any impacts that would otherwise that would create adverse environmental conditions. Only the changes, though.
But given that there are changes which potentially could have environmental impacts, and given that this board has already made a decision that there aren't any significant environmental impacts enough to warrant a full seeker analysis, which just based on history of other things in the town have gone on, where there have been similar issues with well water and expansions that impacts steep slopes and trees and everything else, where positive declarations have been made, I'm questioning the viability and the goodness of not transferring this over to an agency that this particular new aspect of it to get analyzed so that environmental impacts are really seriously taken into account by people who have the experience to look at them.
As far as the planning board is the one who recommended the modifications that are the subject of this change. And the planning board doesn't have any further approval authority. They cannot be lead agency with respect to this particular action.
Well, then why is this even a question about lead agency if there's no possibility of change?
Part of the process. It's part of the process.
But doesn't approval and choice to be lead agency imply that there's an alternative? If not, why have any question? Why is there anything
Because there are other.
There's a secret requirement that we make a notification to involved agencies. That's why we're doing it.
I understand that, but doesn't it imply that you can also change lead agency?
No, it doesn't.
I believe it does. Is that
differ
true that
on
it
our-
does?
The other the involved agencies that will be notified will have an opportunity to either to comment or to suggest or to take the position that they should be lead agencies. But it's only the other involved agencies that have permitting authority that have that right to comment or take the position that they should be lead agency.
So there is a possibility that if they chose to, they could battle it out between the ZBA and other agencies.
That's why we're going through the process right now.
So notice.
Okay, so there is that possibility. You just said there wasn't. So that's my comment, that this should be open. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to make a motion.
Karen Wells, 28 Appleby Farm Road, representing the Greater Teton Defense Alliance. Sir, can you explain to the audience who is allowed to be lead agency other than this board?
The other involved agencies who are who will be notified through the secret requirements.
And who are those agencies?
Westchester County Department of Health, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Region 3, New York State, and New York State Department of Health.
Given the wide-ranging issues that this project encompasses, and given the New York State relationship to this facility, we would respectfully ask that one of those other agencies take over as lead agency.
You should ask them.
And
They'll be
we,
getting the notice, and if they want to object to our being lead agent, they can do so. So speak to them. They'll love to hear your suggestion.
sir, may I finish without interruption?
If you keep to the topic,
I am keeping to the topic. How have I diverged?
go ahead.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I will speak to the other agencies, and I suggest people in the community do as well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hi. I just have one last procedural question. Adam Stallero again, Cy Paget and Roselle. So now if we're shifting all the public comment to the next, whatever the next hearing is that this gets taken up, I just want to hear from the board and from council whether there will be an opportunity for the board to consider everything that's being presented and heard at the next public hearing, or whether there's a possibility that the board will both declare itself lead agency and vote to approve the revised site plan in a single meeting.
We're going to do the former this evening. We're going to declare ourselves lead agency this evening.
Of intent to be lead
Intent,
agency.
right, yep.
Right.
And then we are going to hear the facts of the application, and we will hear from the public.
At a later date.
Well, I think beginning next meeting.
Assuming the responses come in at the appropriate time.
Right.
There will be an opportunity for the public to be heard on matters that are at issue with this secret review and this particular application amending the special use permit.
Next meeting and for however many
And-
meetings it takes.
And assuming there's no challenge to us being lead agency.
Right,
Right.
of
If
course.
there's a
yeah.
challenge, what does that do to us?
Well, we'll have to go through that process then.
That's another problem.
Okay, just so everybody knows, that if we're challenged, then it progresses to another level.
Right. I mean, the meeting may not be next month with respect to hearing the underlying merits of this application and the secret review with respect to this specific application.
If the applicant can get the other involved agencies to waive, can it be next month?
If they respond before the 30-day period, yes, it can go next
Okay.
month. Unfortunately, there's not 30 days between now and the next meeting in February, which is February 28th. They would have to respond and take the position that they don't have any comments or any objections to
When
lead
must the
agency.
applicant advise us that they have the necessary waivers?
Well, that would go to the Director of Planning's office. We issue the notice of intent to be, or the Planning Department would issue the notice of intent.
I just want to make sure the public has enough.
Sure.
notice.
If the board issues its notice of intent tonight, the distribution of that notice will occur tomorrow, and it will be 30 days from the date of tomorrow, so February 1st. So unfortunately, your meeting is within that 30 days. What council is advising is if we hear from all of those involved agencies prior to your next meeting in ample time so that we can put out notifications, then you can hear this application at your next meeting. But we would have to receive all of those no objection letters or objection letters prior to that meeting.
In order to put this site plan on the agenda.
Correct. What is the date of the February meeting? The date of the February meeting is February 28th, so it's not within the 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
So the board can then make a motion to declare its intent to be lead agency and the distribution of the intent to be lead agency.
I make such a motion that the CBA issue a notice of its intent to declare itself the lead agency and have that status under seeker.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then I would have a motion to adjourn to the February 28th meeting, subject to receipt of appropriate responses from the, from involved agencies under SECRA. And we'll, obviously notify the public. The public will be made aware if we can't proceed on that date.
Okay. I make such a motion that it be our intent to hold this matter over until the February 28th meeting. That assumes that we've received responses from all involved agencies.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Next case, Sayaz? Did I say that right? Science?
Hi.
Hi, I'm Mary Scott, the architect for Mark and Stacy Scions. I'm here tonight to request a side yard variance in order to install a backup emergency generator 20 feet from the side yard setback line when 45 feet is required. The Scionses had a backup generator next to their old garage, which is here. Recently, we did a project where we added a new garage with a guest room over it and a bridge connecting the old house to the new house, or the new garage apartment. In doing that, we had to relocate the generator. So we looked at different locations. Originally, we were going to put it next to the new garage, but because of this overhang on the side and the grassy slope, if we had set it next to it, it would have been in the middle of the grass. So what we proposed to do is to move it over into an area that has a lot of existing screening, and that puts us within the setback on that north side. The reason we chose to put it on this side of the house as opposed to the other side is because this house that's next door is actually 95 feet away from where the generator would be. It's a large house set on a 4-acre piece of property. On the other side, the house is actually about 41 feet away. So if we put it on the other side, it would be much closer to the neighbor, and it would also be much farther away from the electric panel, which is in the garage. So we felt, given the restrictions of the lot and the fact that it's a generator and not a building, this would be an appropriate place.
And you don't feel that there's any necessity, given the existing trees and shrubs and so forth, to do any additional screening?
If there is, this client will, I mean,
Yeah.
he's very into his landscaping.
Mr. Chair, it's a largely wooded area, I believe, next to this.
Right.
There's not, you can't see very much.
I know Carolyn Place very well.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this application?
There's a lot of property in the back. Why?
Well, it's all open, with the soccer, it's just.
But if you moved it more towards the house a little bit and back, you wouldn't need a variance. If you just moved it over here.
Well, see, this is where the grassy slope is, and this is where all the trees are. So the idea was to put it in the trees, not in the grass.
How is it fueled, Mary?
It's gas propane.
Propane? So where's the tank gonna be? Right?
The tank is actually buried.
Oh, all right. So it's located already?
Yes.
Mary? I think you're asking for the wrong variance. I'm trying to help you. I don't want you to have to come back to us. It's a 45-foot required setback, and you're going to be 20 feet off the line. So you need 25 feet instead of 22 feet.
I updated, we actually updated it, so
Okay.
I think maybe you got.
I got the
that might be
original.
old-
I have the original. Okay, but I'll just give this to.
Okay, the new one is.
I'll give this to Adriana when we're done. Make sure that they match.
Yes.
But
We're looking for a 25.
if we should grant, it'll be a 25-foot variance, not a 22-foot. Good. other than that, I don't have any problem
So
with it.
the neighbors all know about this? They've gotten,
They were all notified.
no one's here.
No, I've asked. I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Who'd like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the application of Stacy Sinowitz, 37 Carolyn Place, for a 25-foot side yard variance for the location of a generator, for the following reasons. We've heard from the applicant's representative that this is the place that is furthest from any possible interference with neighbors. It's also in an area that's well-sheltered and screened already, and that the applicant is likely to do additional screening if it feels it's necessary. No neighbors have appeared or written in opposition. The granting of the variance will not create an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties. No other feasible method is available to the applicant, which is likely to achieve the benefits sought by the applicant. The requested variance is not substantial considering the size of the property. And the variance will not have a adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood. For these reasons, I move that we approve the application. Richard, do you need anything about the location?
We're doing an as-built on at the end anyway for
everything.
for
Yeah,
everything.
so we'll
I'll,
have that.
I'll have they're gonna supply an as-built.
An as-built survey upon completion of all the construction.
Are we putting a time limit on this, Harvey?
And it's already there.
No, but they're
Oh,
ready. I mean, it's
okay.
piped, so.
Within
6 months will not be a problem.
6 months, and you have your variance.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Have your
Thank you.
variance. You're welcome.
35 Court Mill LLC.
How you doing?
Hi, good.
My name is Manuel Andrade. I'm representing Michael Bird Architecture. This project involves some renovation to an existing residence. The part that's involved in the variance is the front portion of the project. That's a enclosure of the vestibule, a covered porch, and stairways. Currently, the stairs come down and off to the right of the property, away from the driveway. So we're proposing that it goes towards the driveway. It's gone to the Architecture Review Board, and working with them, we got approval. And by working with them, our original variance request was for 18 feet. Working with the Architecture Review Board, we can reduce that down to 15 feet.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to this application? No.
One question. You're showing a little addition on the back of the house, on the same side where you're looking for a variance.
We're asking for the variance.
Yeah, I know that, I know that. What I want to ask our attorney and our building inspector is that the addition proposed on the back of the house increases the nonconformity on that side. Do they also need a variance for that, or is that route required?
Did I miss it?
You have an existing nonconforming and you're increasing that nonconformity.
Which variance is that for?
On
Which
the
yard?
On the side yard, 34.58 feet, where
The new bedroom that they,
where 35 is required.
Yeah, they need a variance for that. They need a variance for that, don't they?
they're increasing their. Yeah, I missed that one, sorry. Yeah,
I know it's minuscule, but we should keep the record
Yeah,
straight.
no.
I have no objection to it, I just want to
But
make
the
sure.
problem is, we would need to notice that variance is the
Well,
concern.
I'm sorry about that, but that's what it is.
Yeah,
where you step your house in a few inches.
This,
Between this and this?
no, between side yard.
The less
35 feet
than
is
1 foot
required. They
variance
don't
that
have
you
to-
would need,
Right, I understand.
See, over here it's legal, it's existing.
technicality, but
Oh, I
you still
see.
have to
You
give
increase it.
the notice
Legal
to
Then
existing
you have to
house.
renotice to the neighbors that
adjourn,
you're
Oh, they're not
adjoining
variance to this
neighbors
part.
on
Yeah,
this.
let me
Extending
side
it,
yard variance in
extending
addition
it
to the
here.
front yard variance.
Even though they've already, okay,
Right.
it's already non-conforming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you can't increase or decrease a
Yeah,
non-conforming
no, I see it.
situation without a
Where-
variance.
I mean, if we propose to bump that to 35 feet in that one section over there, so it conformed, the addition conforms.
Then you
I
don't,
hate to have you do that, I don't want to hold the whole parade up, but it just, I'm trying to help you in the future, that you, someday you want to
Right.
sell a house, and you're not going to have a legal CO because you have an existing variance
Either
that's
go through a
needed.
notice procedure again, or? Okay, so, we'll have to
okay.
resubmit for
We'll
the.
see you next month.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just sending out notices again.
No big deal.
Oh, one question before you leave,
Yes,
why does the house have 2 front doors? Is it split in two?
it was before, it's not done anymore. We can't figure out why.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody was sneaking in a 2-family house and we didn't know about it.
Well, we're getting rid of it now, so.
Okay, I just wondering, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks.
Unger. Okay, who's next?
Unger.
Unger, next is Unger.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mike Testa. I'm here with Mr. Howard Unger, the owner of the property, with regards to trying to get a certificate of occupancy for a detached pool cabana that was built back in 2004. And I'd like to just give you a brief history of it. I gave it in my cover letter, but we originally filed for his application for a certificate of occupancy last May. And one of the issues that was raised during the CO, we need to get an updated survey, which we didn't have. As a result of the updated survey, which was done by Johnson's surveyors, we found out that the pool cabana actually encroached into a requirement of the Planning Commission when this house was originally done, which was the grading limits line. That grading limits line issue resulted in a meeting between Bob Cioli and Sabrina and myself. And she asked us to have the land surveyor come up with a modified plan to depict a modified grading limits line that would comply. The plan that you see in the back, which is the color plan, was a result of that. That was done by Johnson and Company, which modified the grading limits line, and we basically increased our new line by about 50%. So we have not yet gone back before the Planning Commission, which is a requirement. But we can't go back to the planning board because as part of the application for the planning commission, there was a coverage calculation sheet that was required to be filled out. In filling out that application, when I initially did the application, I came to the conclusion that we exceeded the allowable building coverage and development coverage. And that was news to us because as a result of the prior application that was made when the structures were originally built, it complied totally. As a result, I asked the surveyor to develop an actual land breakdown for the development coverage and the building coverage, which is on your sheet there. It's an attached on the plan, and it's also a separate sheet in your packet. As a result of that revised application, the current building coverage is 63 square feet over the allowable, which based on that he calculated that with a computer. He's assured me that these numbers are accurate.
And on the development coverage, we're 628 square feet over the allowable coverage for development coverage. And as a result, we're trying to determine actually how this actually happened, but in 2004, we submitted a modified survey, foundation survey, which actually was requested by the owner for the stakeout of the cabana by Campbell Engineering. Campbell staked it out. I included that survey in there, which showed the compliance. All the building department inspections have been made on the site. The foundation survey was approved, the framing, the electrical, the insulation. So all inspections have been done. The only item that was checked off that has not been done is the final approval. And as a result of now bringing this to light, we have no other choice but to come back before your board for a variance for those two items. At the same time, if we are successful at that venture, we have to go back before the Planning Commission and modify the Planning Commission approval for the grading limits line. And if you look on the drawing, it's a de minimis little encroachment on the building for the grading limits line. But as a result, nevertheless, we feel that we were trying to address all concerns that were raised by Sabrina and Bob Scioli and Richie Polgari. I mean, I'd be glad to try to enlighten you on any questions I can.
Rich, do you want to add anything that?
No, I mean, he's trying to bring up something that either got missed or misinterpreted when it was originally applied for, and bring it to light and fixing it. So we've had no complaints on the property, no problems with the property, so.
Okay. Let the record show there's no neighbors have appeared to speak to this application.
One item I'd just like to bring to your attention, the property is a 1-acre zoning, and this property is actually a 4.7-acre piece of property. Heavily manicured, surrounded by woods. We have no objections from the neighbors. They've stated so, and I have a letter if you need a letter from them. And we clearly understand that, you know, the Planning Commission may impose other restrictions on us, but we've tried to address those in that plan to address any kind of issues that we thought would be raised at any discussion.
What you're looking for us tonight is just these coverage.
Yes, Tony. The two issues of
coverage variants, nothing
the
else.
building coverage and the development coverage. Those are the only two items. There are no other variants
Existed for
since 2004.
a long time.
Yes.
Any other comments by the board? No. I move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Who'd like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion at the application of Howard and Mindy Unger for two coverage variants. One building coverage variance in the amount of, I'm going to call it 63 feet.
Yes.
What do you have down?
I have 63 feet.
Okay, because I have 62, 66, I'll call it 63.
Okay.
And a development coverage variance in the amount of 626 square feet. All right, what do you have?
He said
628.
628?
Yeah.
How'd you get that? I'll have to believe you.
I see.
I have 626. A couple of feet I'm not going to argue with.
I'll defer to you, sir.
620.
No, you have a sharp pencil. I know that.
628 square feet.
Okay.
Okay. I think we should approve that for the following reasons. The granting of the variance will not create an undesirable change to the character of the neighborhood. There is no other method other than granting of variance to achieve the method requested. In this particular case, these are not substantial variances. There will be no physical adverse effects on the conditions of the neighborhood or the town. This is not really a self-created hardship in that the initial approvals for this property were made based on relying on the surveys done at the time, not by the homeowner, but the survey company, and errors were created not intentionally, but accidentally. And we don't need any framing on things, we don't need any measurements, we don't need any time limits, it's already there. This situation has existed since 2004 without any adverse effect to the neighborhood or the town, and there have been no saying anything against this application. For those reasons, we should grant.
I second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Have
Thank you,
your-
members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful house.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me. I move that we adopt the December 20th, 2017 meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. We're off.